Well, hello everyone. Today we are here to chat about everything that I read in August. We'll say not the most amazing reading month I've ever had, but I did read quite a few books. Let's dive in. So I thought I would start out with the least favorite to most favorite, if you are cool with that. First up is a DNF. I ended up giving up on Hidden Valley Road. I was listening to this on audio and I just wasn't connecting with it. I just didn't want to be reading it. I will say it is about schizophrenia. It's actually about a whole family, and nearly the entire amount of the children in the family had schizophrenia. I think the father also had schizophrenia, and this was like a family of, I don't know, 12 kids or something along those lines. So they were very important for science to learn more about schizophrenia. I know that it would have been interesting, but I just, for some reason, wasn't in the mood maybe for it. I don't know. I will say there was quite a little bit in here about falconry, which I was not expecting, nor did I want to read about. I didn't realize about some of the gross things that happen with falconry in terms of what they do to the bird. I hope that that has changed in recent years. In any case, I DNF'd that one. I also ended up DNFing Sundial by Catriona Ward. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right. Apologies if I am not saying her name right. I read The Last House on Needless Street last year, I believe, and I really enjoyed that book. But Sundial is about a mother who discovers that her daughter is doing some fairly terrifying things, basically collecting animals and killing animals. And I didn't know that going into it. And the animal cruelty in here and descriptions about dead animals, I just really, I'm not interested in that. Like, all of the humans in the world can be hurt terribly in my mind when I'm reading a book or watching a movie. Everything's fine for me. As soon as you hurt an animal, I shut down, I'm done. So I just couldn't continue on with that book. Now, luckily for me, we're going from DNFs to 3 stars. So really not a terrible reading month on the whole. I gave 3 stars to Remarkable Creatures by Tracy Chevalier. As you guys know, I've been absolutely adoring Tracy Chevalier. I read 2 of her books at the beginning of the year, wanted to continue on with her back catalog because she's written quite a few books. And this is what I wanted to head to next. This is about 2 women, Mary Anning and Elizabeth Philpott, who both live in a certain area in England along the coast. And they're both really interested in finding the creatures that you find along the coast. Now, Mary comes from a kind of impoverished background, and Elizabeth has kind of taken a hit with her financial security. Her brother has recently gotten married, and she and her sisters, who are not married, have to go and move away to a smaller cottage, and that is what they do in the 19th century, apparently. So we follow these 2 women creating a bond through this book, and I really did enjoy this bond. I will say this is definitely not my favorite of her books. Her other books I've given 5 stars, and this I gave 3, just because I wasn't always glued. I did, however, love that this is based on a true story. Like, Mary Anning and Elizabeth Philpott actually did exist. Mary discovered all sorts of creatures that had essentially gone extinct, and she was digging up the bones. And at this time, you know, up until this time, creationism was thought to be the way that life existed. And, you know, God created the earth in 7 days and all of that. And this finding animals and eventually dinosaurs that had gone extinct was so mind-blowing for the people of this time. It was so fascinating to see the characters interact with people of the clergy and that kind of thing, and just with one another, dealing with this kind of traumatic knowledge in a way, because it would be traumatic to have everything that you believed, you know, basically flipped on its head. I did enjoy this. Again, not my favorite, but still it kind of rounded out my summer reads as well. Last summary book of the year, and now we're straight into fall. So another book that I gave 3 stars was Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook. This follows a woman who discovers that her sister, who had gone missing many years ago, was discovered, and she gets to the hospital ready to meet her sister, thinking she's going to meet a woman, and actually sees that her sister is still a child and she should be like 20 something years old. So something weird is going on, and it kind of goes back and forwards in time. It goes back in time to when she and her mom and her other sisters go to live at this very small town, kind of coastal town. And there are all sorts of stories that whirl around the town about changelings and how many children have gone missing to be replaced with changelings. This book to me really had a C.J. Tudor and also a Simone St. James vibe to it, where it's more along the like light horror edge of things as opposed to thrillers. So I will say that, like, I think a lot of people would pick this book up and think, oh, it'll be a nice little mystery, but it's definitely got some like paranormal aspects to it. And I did enjoy it. I felt like the end was very abrupt and kind of left me with all sorts of questions that went unanswered. So that is why it was a 3-star read and not more. And now we're moving into all the 4-star reads that I read in August. First of which is Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. This is about a family who really are not close in any way, shape, or form, but they're kind of forced to get together because their grandmother is turning 80 and she's having a party at her house, which is in England on a kind of island. It's a situation where when the tide comes in, you're kind of stuck on the island until morning when it goes out again, and then you can leave. So it's not the greatest situation to be in when someone is killing off members of the family. And it starts with the grandmother dying and moves along through the family. It's very much like a retelling of And Then There Were None. And I think there's a lot of retellings of that book because it's such a powerful, quintessential mystery book. So I understand that, but I thought this was really good. I will say there's a bit of an otherworldly vibe to this book, which I enjoyed. I don't usually always enjoy that when I'm in my thriller books, but I did enjoy it here. And I have to say, it was so atmospheric. The grandmother's birthday is on Halloween, and so we meet this family gathering around that time. This would be a great book to pick up at Halloween, and I was totally and utterly hooked. That atmosphere, waiting for the tide to go out, even the chapters are kind of broken down into time lapses. So we've got like 3:45, less than 3 hours until low tide when they can leave again. So we have these sequences of, people in the family turning on one another, wondering who is the killer on this little island. And then we do go back in time and find out why they have had such a major rift. You find out why Daisy Darker, who is our main character in the story, why she's had a rift with her sisters and her mother and father. And I really, really enjoyed that. Not only the atmosphere of the island, but even the house itself was so nice. There's even a little map at the beginning of the story, so you can look at that. There are all sorts of clocks in the hallways. Her grandmother collected clocks. She was a very eccentric, kind of really interesting individual, and I was completely hooked. So I gave that 4 stars. Another book I gave 4 stars was The Divines by Ellie Eaton. I've had this on my shelves for a while and I don't know why I hadn't picked it up yet. This is very much a dark academia book, and we follow a woman here who has just recently gotten married, and she is talking to her husband about her teenagehood and when she lived at a boarding school. And at that boarding school, the girls were essentially called as a cohesive group the Divines, and their mothers went there when they were teenagers and their mothers before them. It's very much a tradition, and it really is a more realistic version of Mean Girls. It is pretty nasty how these girls are to one another. It opens with the death of one of the students who fell to her death, and the whole school is shut down at that point. And she is essentially remembering the experience and what happened. And it does go backwards and forwards in time and that kind of thing, but I was really invested and needed to know what happened to this girl who died at the school. And also, it was so interesting. It definitely played with the concept of memory. And we all have these memories of our childhood and our teenage years. And some of them are so vivid that it feels like it just happened to us. And then others feel, I don't know, some of them for me just completely vanished from my mind. But this kind of explores, like, did I remember that rightly? And I really appreciated that. Really, really good. I'll definitely read more by Ellie Eaton. It was definitely a dark book. And if you were bullied in high school, this might be kind of a rough one to go to, but also maybe something that will be of interest to you, because it was very, very interesting to me. So that is The Divines. I gave it 4 stars. And last but not least is Broken Harbour by Tana French. So this is the 4th in her Dublin Murder Squad series, which I have been loving. I gave this one 4 stars. And this follows a detective who gets to the scene of a crime where it's basically suburbia, but we've got a neighborhood that has been kind of abandoned. So there was this development that happened. A ton of people bought houses in this development that kind of overlooked the coast. It was meant to be really beautiful, upscale. And this family moved there, and then there was a financial crash, I think in 2008. And the rest of the houses just were not built, and the developers just left. And so you're in the midst of, like, some houses done, some very much not. You're still in a construction zone, then you will be forever, it seems. And the detective arrives to the scene of a crime where a family has been brutally murdered. So we've got the father killed, stabbed, both of the children in their beds, murdered, and the mother has been stabbed a bunch of times as well, and she is headed to the hospital, and it doesn't look like she's gonna make it. And so he's exploring what happened to this family in this strange environment. It was really good. It was probably one of my least favorite of the series, probably my least favorite. I just found it really, really hard to read about the kids. It was quite graphic, and it wasn't just it being graphic. It felt like they were kids. Like you get to kind of know the kids a little bit in the book, and I really struggled with that. I guess because I have Nora. That doesn't always bug me, but it did bug me this time. So those are all of the books that I read in August. Let me know in the comments below. Did you read a 5-star? Because I didn't read a 5-star. I'd love to know what that was, and I will talk to you very soon. I'm ready to get into the fall stuff now. Let's just embrace it. Bye!